Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out on this dark and stormy night. It's a challenge, and we're really happy that so many of you were able to make it. Can you hear me? Yes. My name is Betty Sargent, and I am very honored to be introducing our first speaker in the library's new Meet the Publishing Pros series, Jonathan Galassi, President and Publisher of Farrar, Straus Giroux. Everybody knows, I'll go back. We started this series to try to learn more about the tremendous changes that are going on these days for both publishers and libraries. We all know what caused this upheaval. It's technology. Until fairly recently, we didn't have iPhones, and we didn't have ebooks and Kindles and audiobooks making book reading available every 24 hours. Available 24 hours every single day. We didn't have social media taking up so much of our time, or Netflix and its competitors bombarding us with easily accessible entertainment. And most of all, we didn't have Amazon. So, we feel particularly lucky tonight to have one of the bright stars, and that's a quote, in the publishing business to tell us about the impact that all of these new ways of communicating are having on both libraries and in the book publishing business. Jonathan Galassi is a published poet, Morning Run and North Street, a novelist, Muse, which you can purchase right after our talk. He is an eminent translator of Italian poetry, as well as a brilliant editor. He studied English at Harvard with instructors including Robert Lowell and Elizabeth Bishop. After Harvard, he became a Marshall Scholar at Cambridge, and that's when he figured out that he wanted to be in the book publishing business. And what a career that has been. Farrar Straus, for 32 years, has been Jonathan's place of employment. They have published 20 Nobel laureates and 7 Pulitzer Prize winning authors, including Flannery O'Connor, Isaac Singer, Susan Sontag, Thomas Wolfe, Joan Didion, Seamus Heaney, and John McPhee. In my opinion, Jonathan is the smartest, kindest, most gifted editor-publisher of the last 40 years. But don't just take it from me. Here's what a couple of other people have said about Jonathan. And I quote, Galassi is the preeminent literary editor in this country. He's been doing it better and longer than anyone. And that was said by Alan Peacock, an editor at Holt. And again I quote, Galassi is the best editor in America, said Roger Straus, co-founder of FSG. He has got great taste, a wide canvas of interest, and a concentration level which is utterly astounding. Jonathan himself acknowledges that the publishing industry, quote, has changed more in the last 2 decades than in the previous 200 years. He said that in an article in the Harvard magazine in 1997. So, let's see what he thinks now. Please welcome Jonathan Galassi.
Well, how can I survive that, Betty? Really? It's too kind, too much hyperbole. I have a bad cold that I picked up at my daughter's wedding this weekend, so I hope I'm lucid. But in any case, I think that Betty has actually given a very accurate summary of where publishing has gone in my time in it. I started in 1973 at Houghton Mifflin, when Houghton Mifflin was still at 2 Park Street, looking over the Boston Common, and they had the contract for Walden by Henry David Thoreau in the president's office downstairs. It was a very old line, waspy Bostonian company that had been, it was the descendant of Ticknor and Fields, which was really the first major American publisher that was right up at the top of the street, right across from the State House. And it really felt very 19th century. Everything, we had file cards for everything. We had, of course, we didn't have foolscap and pen and ink, but we had carbon paper, we had files, eventually we had Selectric typewriters with, remember those little pieces of correcting paper that you, yes, that you made a mess with, that your letters never looked good. In fact, my first really great experience there was, I was hired as a kind of editorial intern, and I was very lucky to get that job. And I was asked as a young whippersnapper to read a manuscript that had already been acquired by us. It was the second novel by Robert Stone, who's a very considerable novelist. And it was called Dog Soldiers. And I read this manuscript and I was blown away by how wonderful it was, how flawless it was, and how beautifully typed it was. There was not one error. There was no white out. There were no corrections on the pages. And I thought, oh, this is publishing. It's pristine. It's high class. It's great literature. Oh, it took many, many years before I got to read anything as good as that again. But I loved the interaction with the author primarily. That was the thing that most excited me. The appreciating their work, working with them to make it even better. And that actually has been the thing that has meant the most to me all through my work. I found it very hard to reject people at first. I found it very, very difficult to write letters that I knew would be hurtful to someone, until it occurred to me that I hadn't asked them to send manuscripts. And that made it a lot easier. I remember one day a man came into the lobby and I was sent down to receive whatever it was he was offered. And he wanted to recite his poems to me in the lobby. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. And he was very offended. He said, nothing bad is going to happen to you today. So we walked away from each other. But that was the old days. I don't know if you call them the good old days or not. They were the old days. There was an elevator lady who had white gloves who would take us up and down the elevator. And it was really, really ancient history. And this was Boston. Boston was still a cultural center. It wasn't the Athens of America anymore, but there were 5 or 6 publishing houses there. And New York was considered very questionable, a little bit louche, and that's why they had auctions for books, which Bostonians did not really appreciate. But eventually, I went down to New York. I was sent down there by Tony Mifflin, and I loved it. And I've never moved since. I've moved houses. I left Tony Mifflin. I went to Random House, which was probably a mistake since I was fired 5 years later. But then old-fashioned in its way as Hogan was in its own way. It was the grungiest office you've ever seen. It paid rock bottom wages. It was like something out of a movie, but it was wonderful because what mattered at FSG was the relation with the author, and we got many great authors. Bob Giroux, who Roger hired after about 10 years of knocking around, doing all sorts of different kinds of publishing. Bob had been a very noted literary publisher at Harcourt Brace, one of the old line New York firms, and he had a falling out with the new management there, and Roger brought him over, and a lot of great authors followed him, people like Flannery O'Connor, Robert Lowell, Bishop, G. Stafford, many great writers, and that's really when it wasn't called, it was Farrar, Straus and Young at that time. Roger had a whole series of partners, but eventually it became Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And with young editors like Henry Robbins and Aaron Asher, all sorts of people like Joan Didion, Tom Wolfe, John McPhee, Philip Roth came to FSG, and it was really, I remember Phyllis Graham, who was a really great commercial publisher, said at one time that there was a period in the 70s when FSG was the hottest publisher in town, and it was all because of the authors. And Betty has given a picture of how the mechanics of publishing have changed so much because of technology, because we have all sorts of different formats for books now, and because the selling of books has been mechanized too. We used to have sales travelers who would go around to independent bookstores all over the country. I went with them. It was great fun, and there were long, passionate sales conferences where we would argue about whether to print 15,000 or 17,000 copies of the book. And the travelers and the book buyers in the stores had these very complicated, close, competitive, combative relationships that were really the heart of there was the editorial function, and then there was the selling function, and they were both people businesses in a very intimate way, and that has pretty much gone away. But the one thing that hasn't gone away is still the connection between the author and the editor. I maintain that that's still a heart of what we do, and the externals of it are very different, but that core is still what's most important. But I wanted, before I open this up to questions, I want to read you a few things today from an article I read today, actually, in something called Publishing Perspectives, which is probably the most revealing organ of the publishing business today. And this is an interview with a man named Morten Hesseldahl. He's the new head of Gyldendal in Denmark, which is one of the oldest publishers in Europe. It's almost 200 years old, and it's standard bearer for European culture, for the interrelation of I hear he's called Voldemort because he's quite iconoclastic. And he's worked in a lot of other businesses, in newspapers, in the Danish Broadcasting Corporation. He's director of the Royal Danish Theatre. But he perceives that publishing is in crisis and that it needs to change. And he said the publishing industry will survive as long as it delivers products that can't be matched by others. And I think that's right, because we're in competition for the time of our readers, our consumers. They have so many other options for that their options have expanded, but their time has not, and that's our problem. He says, we haven't been very good at developing stories that reflect the cultural diversity that increasingly has characterized our society. We need to relate to an international world. Our literature still primarily focuses on white middle-class men and women. Does that sound familiar? We're going through these very same things. Product supply from the cultural industry has exploded as a consequence. Competition is fierce. In addition, both digitization and large international stakeholders' movements have definitely wiped away the last touch of the sheltered workshop ambience that I described earlier on. Publishing today is about life and death. But then again, hasn't it always been? I think we'll continue to be here, recognizable but completely transformed. So that transformation is what we hear about every day, what we live through. And I would say that publishing, trade publishing right now is, I would say, static as a business. Our particular business is growing, but I don't think that's true of our industry as a whole. But the connection to the reader is still fundamental, and I know you all read. You need books. Books are going to be written because people need to express themselves, and it's up to us to make sure that you all want to read them. So I think that I'd rather have this be a dialogue. So please, if you have comments, Alex.
Do you publish to hit a reader where they are, or a reader where you want them to be?
Bob Gottlieb, who is one of the great publishers of the last 25, 30, 40 years, said there are two ways of being a publisher. You can either lead or follow. You can either give people what you think they want or what you think they're going to want or should want. And that's a risky thing. It's risky both ways, because if you give them what they wanted last year, they may not want it again. And that's often true in publishing. We always say, the editors always say, the salespeople want what they've already sold successfully, whereas what the public really wants is something new. You have to balance those things.
I'm just curious, do you think audiobooks have expanded the universe of readers, or is it just, taking another form of books?
Well, audiobooks are the biggest growth part of our business at the moment. And I think that reflects the way they're being used. People will listen to them in their car, and then they can sync them so that they continue listening in the house while they do whatever they're doing. But they are, I don't know if, we could have a discussion about whether listening to an audiobook is the same as reading, because it's not really, it's something else. It's consuming a book in a different way, but it's not, there's something about the reading process where you're applying your, where you set the speed and you can go back and forth, and where you take it in your own way, that is different, I think. But audiobooks, listen, I'll take them. They're growing, growing fast, and their engagement with writing, so they're all too good. But I'm not sure how to answer your question. Really, it's something ancillary, I think.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned books being able to provide an experience that you can't get from other medium. But one of the books I'm reading right now that FSG brought out really does that. It's called The Third Hotel by Laura Vanderbilt.
Oh, yes.
Because the sense of the mood and the atmosphere that you get from that, you can't get it from a film or from anything else. And one of the interesting things it does is have, I guess, what sometimes termed a crossover, because it's a literary horror story and it blends elements of different genres. And I was wondering if you see that as one of the trends where you might see demand and interest, because you have well-established forms and conventions of different genres, but when you blend them together, you can provide an even more satisfying experience that can start competing with, say, peak TV and some of the things you've been seeing in other mediums.
I think you're right that a lot of the new fiction today makes use of genre that we thought of as strictly commercial in very inventive ways. And you know, I'm the age I am. I'm almost 70, so I'm not au courant with the younger reader the way my younger colleagues are. So, and that's why, in fact, I just made Mitzi Angel the publisher of FSG, because she's going to bring us new readers, new writers who are going to work in just the way that you're talking. But I do think that the new reader today is much less interested in the old formats, the old received notions of literature, is much more interested in being entertained in different ways.
Yes, what effect has Amazon had on the economics of publishing, specifically those newer and quality writers that there isn't a huge audience initially for?
Well, you know, the fact is, bookstores have a less, their role in the publishing universe, the ecology of publishing, is less vital than it used to be. There are fewer bookstores, as you've noticed, and they don't always have what you need. So Amazon does have almost everything, really, so that the showcase factor, that bookstores were the place you went to connect to take a look at, to sniff new things, is something that Amazon can't really offer you. They try, they have to look inside the book, but it's not quite the same as the actual physical connection. So I'd say the answer is double. They have the books, but I find that Amazon is better for ordering books if you already know what you want. Discoverability is our big issue, especially with new writers, and we haven't really solved that problem. Yes?
Do you find that libraries are a place where people go to discover new books?
I mean, one of the things that bothers me about libraries today is that the populist factor in libraries, where when in the old days, libraries used to do just what bestsellers are more important in libraries than they used to be. So, but still, libraries are a place where you are with books, and they're all important. And John, would you like to say something about that? This is John Sargent. Betty steps up. He's there.
Welcome. This is John Sargent, who is the head.
He's my boss.
And we're very lucky to have him here tonight. It would be great, and if you wouldn't mind answering a few
But
questions.
he's done a lot of work on libraries, so.
Libraries form an enormously valuable function in the fabric of American reading and are the key place where people who don't have access to books, who are in the lower income strata, or who may not be in the literary world or in a cultured environment, this is where they can find books and afford to actually begin to read. There's also a huge community aspect now to libraries. It's much more powerful than it used to be, which is it's a place for people who believe in books and reading to gather. So they form a lot of good functionality for our society. The main issue we have with libraries now is that they actually compete directly in electronic book form. They compete directly with retailers. So you can order on your New York Public Library app, you can order a book as easily as you can on Amazon if you're a Kindle reader, and the author doesn't get paid for that. So we do have a moment in time where libraries and publishers are again entering an area of difficulty. You read in the newspapers that ebook sales are going down. What they don't say in the newspapers is reading of ebooks in libraries is going up at the same pace it's going down, and the author doesn't share in that at the same level. So this is the current issue between libraries. There has always been love-hate relationship between publishers and authors and libraries. You say that you talk to authors and they say, "Oh, I love libraries, they're fantastic." And then you get it behind closed doors and say, "What do you really think about libraries?" "I don't make any money when people read my book." Right? So there is this historic thing which continues today.
There are some other cultures where authors are compensated for when people borrow books. In England, for instance, I wish we could get there. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
of all the books you've published, do you have a favorite?
Of all the books I've published, you know, Roger, my old boss, used to have an answer to that question. He said it was Memoirs of Hadrian by Margaret Yourcenar because it was safely off, off center. I think I'll give you two answers. Two of the most exciting books I published. One was Presumed Innocent by Scott Giroux, which was the first book really that I published at FSG, which was very exciting. And then The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen was another book that really was tremendously fun to be along for the ride. I don't know if fun is the right word, so it was quite complicated, but very engrossing and interesting. So, but that's a very lethal question you're asking.
First a comment and then a question. Authors don't get royalties on the used books.
No.
And I found it very disheartening when I put a book up on Amazon as published, regular publisher, and 5 seconds afterwards there were used copies being sold. And
Yeah, it's
terrible. Yeah.
It's a problem that we have no control over. It's true. That's your question.
Yeah, my question, is how do you assess the impact on publishing, self-publishing now? Is it good, is it bad, is it both?
Well, it's a huge part of publishing, but it's sort of underground. I don't think it's had a huge impact on our business because the kinds of books that are sold, by and large, self-published books, most of them aren't really, wouldn't be published by a publisher. So there are exceptions that break through and then have you, like 50 Shades of Grey was a self-published book that became huge international. But certainly they're taking a lot of people's money. So, but and it's huge. I don't even know how huge it is, but and Amazon doesn't reveal those things. But yes.
Yes, sir. Earlier in the reading brought up diversity, and then you mentioned that that is something that is very prevalent in society right now. You know, I think pretty much every publisher is at least attempting in some way to bring in voices that aren't necessarily like theirs, and so on and so forth. However, as a writer, when I look at how you get discovered or how you connect with the publisher, I personally haven't seen any change. You know, you still have to woo a New York agent who then in turn still has to woo you. So when we're looking at truly bringing in voices that aren't like ours, is there any shift in how publishers are approaching deal flow?
Well, I think publishers, I have two comments about that. One, what publishers are looking for has changed. The process is more or less the same, but if you look at what people what's reviewed, what's published, what wins prizes, and so there's been a huge shift in the demographic of that. But I think a problem of our business is that it's still, just like this man said, it's still pretty much a white middle class population that's doing this work, and we're trying to change that. That's an important goal. We have to if we want to stay relevant.
Thank you.
Just let me ask her and then.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just to piggyback a moment on her thing, because self-publishing is so huge. My question is, what is the best path to publish at a house like yours for someone who has published their own book?
The best path.
Yeah, to take, for you to actually get to look at it.
Send it to me.
Can't be that easy.
I think.
Sorry.
I think that I think publishers are more accessible today because of internet and all. It's easier to reach them, and I think that it's some people say it's harder to get an agent than it is to get a publisher, but I think just the direct approach is probably the most. Someone will read your book if you send it.
Unsolicited.
I can give you a word of advice, Ned.
Sure.
We are very active in scanning the platforms like Amazon, finding the books that have lots of 4-star reviews, lots of people reviewing them,
Yes.
and we actually reach out and ask people if they want a publishing contract when we find those, and we actually scrape the sites to look for them. So the best way if you're self-published is get a lot of positive reviews on your site. That's the most likely way to attract a publisher to call you. And if you want a proactive approach, you want someone to actually call you, agents do the same thing. So agents are out there scouting all the time on self-published sites, looking for those books that are good enough.
Are you mostly doing that on Amazon? Or are there other outlets too,
The
and you
majority of the data that we have scraped is on Amazon because it's the easiest and most well-organized data, and it is by far and away the most. There's more activity on Amazon than anywhere else. But we do scrape some of the other sites, but it's nowhere near the amount of data.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In my life, the book is so much better value than anything else I buy. I'm going to read this book for I don't know how many hours, and it's the price of a very cheap lunch. And I'm in awe of your ability to go on doing that again there's some sort of structural reason why books are in Galassi too cheap. Is there any light in that tunnel?
I don't think there's been a change in book prices for 20 years, you know, I think that publishers are afraid they'll drive you away. But because of the multiple formats now, I think there's an argument to be made that the hardcover format, which is perhaps what you both like, can be more expensive, and sometimes it is more expensive. And I think it needs to be better quality too, because people, if you want to read the book immediately, you can read it as an ebook and not have to worry about where to put it. But if you want to keep this book, it needs to be something, it needs to be an object that you want in your house. And I think that there are a lot of us who feel that books as things need to be more objet than object.
You had that John Banfield memoir on Dublin.
Yes.
I don't know if it was yours, but
No, but
it was a beautiful piece of work, and I thought, this is just outrageously good.
well,
But do the millennials believe the same thing?
you know, millennials love books, but they love paperbacks more. They don't particularly like ebooks in my experience. They like paperbacks, and the paperback is down but not out. And it's not. It used to be the most popular format. It's one of many now, but it's still a very viable and exciting way of publishing reading. Yes.
I was heartened to hear you say that the best part of publishing is the relationship with the author. And I'd love to hear you describe a little more about what that relationship is like today. Because specifically, what I've heard, which I'm hoping you will debunk, is that the big houses they've gone away from the interesting and novel, that they have their formulas they're looking for, and they want their blockbusters, and they have, minimum word counts or don't bother me, and I think more importantly, that there aren't editors anymore at the big houses who edit, that they primarily do financial analyses of how much promotion might need to go into the book, and primarily through an agent. The publishers are looking for fully edited books ready to go, where there will be no investment on that side. And it may all be true and it may all make sense, but I would love to hear your perspective.
How often do you think that kind of book shows up? I think that, I have a lot of friends in the business who are very dedicated and gifted editors, and who are looking for something that excites them, that they can believe in, that they can work on, that they can form a relationship with the author. And that goes across the board in publishing. I'm sure that there are, big companies need product to keep their machines running. That's all true, but there's always the product has to be developed. It has to be made as good as it can be, and I just don't. I want to stick up for editors because I think that they're really devoted and gifted, and I know editors in their 30s who are just like that, who just are doing what
whether the book was gonna work or not. I think it's really important for writers to know that those first 2 pages matter like crazy.
Well, I think I would say that I can tell very fast if something isn't right
Right,
for me.
okay.
And then, I keep going and it, you know,
It gets
doesn't,
more right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that my experience, the thing that I find true about reading a book is the farther you go, the more you like it, the more tense you get, because the more frightened you are that it's not going to pan out. And that's a very, very evolving experience, and very, I remember when I was reading Presumed Innocent, I said to someone, if the judge did it, I can't publish the book. But I think I can tell right away if it's not something that is working for me.
For you.
Yeah.
Right. But it is important, I think, for writers to understand that they've got to do their very best work at the beginning, or they're gonna not, I mean, it could be a brilliant novel, and if it's clumsy at the outset, you're gonna have a lot of.
Well, there are lots of times when an editor will say, well, the first 30 pages of blah, 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 but then again, and, you know, so our job is to try to either cut off the first 30 pages or get them to redo them or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could you say a few words about your thoughts on poetry publishing, not just now, not just FSG, but generally speaking?
Well, I think poetry is actually a very alive part of our publishing culture. And as Dan Halpern, who's an old friend of mine who's been doing it as long as I have, he says it's the thing that hasn't changed really at all in our lifetimes. It's a little bit under the radar. It's very seldom commercial in terms of fiction, say, or other, but it's a very active part of the bookstore, and it's because it's so, what would you say, divided. There's so many different poets. People's taste in poetry is so idiosyncratic that, you know, very few poets people come together in that particular taste, but it's very, I love, poetry is my own great love, and it has no real commercial justification, but as my great hero Montala said, all it takes is a pencil and a piece of paper to do it. So, but if you talk to a bookstore person, they'll tell you how traveled the poetry section of the bookstore is.
Are book proposals still as important in today's new publishing world?
Oh yeah, because you have to. Yes, they're just as that has not changed at all. You have to.
The same traditional elements, nothing new that you're looking for that needs to be added.
Well, people do them different ways. So some people spend a huge amount of time on the marketing. My own feeling is what you really want is an argument that's convincing and a sample and you know, chapter or pages that show how you're going to do it.
Could you just elaborate a little on who the new readers are, and what's going to happen when the old readers disappear?
Well, you know, the new readers are the people who are younger than us, and they have had a different life experience, different political education, different cultural experiences. They've had us as parents, whereas we had them as parents. You know, so their life is different, and what they want, and their expectations, their worries, their concerns are different, and they don't have the same common culture we did. They have something else. So,
But they don't seem to read as much. Is that
well,
busy
that's
and-
partly because they have so many other, they have these things. We didn't have these. They have this, they spend so much time on them. Sometimes they read on them. They read books on their phones, you know, which I don't do that, but other people I know do. And so that, I don't know, I'm not trying to be facetious. I just think that, you know, the readers that we have been are very different from our parents as readers. It's the same thing. It's natural. It's an actuarial fact.
Do you think these new readers require shorter books, and therefore
I think-
publishers are looking for shorter books than before?
I think people like shorter books today. I don't know if it's those readers or us, but, you know, people's attention spans are challenged. Articles are shorter in magazines, newspapers, everything, because it's on to the next thing. So I think short books are intriguing, actually. And, Jeanette.
Do you think that these newer readers are going to take the time to read the 19th century novels that we love, or the 18th century novels? Or they're going to much more likely to pick up some short
We'll see.
current book?
I think they will, because I think eventually people discover that, as Francis said, his first book of essays was called How to Be Alone, and that reading is really about solitude. And we need solitude in this over-committed world. And I think reading George Eliot or something is one way to have that. And I think people will discover. They have to come to it. Maybe they have to get older before they do it. But I do. I believe.
Just looking at my grandson's list of what he reads in school is so different from what I had to read, because it's all much more current political or sexual orientation. Not reading, you know, what I would think should be reading more classic.
You have to step in there.
How old is he?
He's 11.
Is he reading Catcher in the Rye? Yeah.
Catcher in the Rye.
No.
He
No.
doesn't.
Just wondered. Yes.
What you want to say is that so many independent publishers have now been bought out by corporations, and it seems like there are only a few houses with many imprints, and imprints that used to be independent publishers, and so I'm wondering how that affects the books you publish. If it has any influence, or does it change the personality of the independent publishers who were bought out by corporations and the layers of management?
We're an example of that. FSG was 25 years ago. We were bought by the Holzbrig company family, and we're still acting pretty much the way we did. We have more stable financial backing. We have better selling. You know, but we're still FSG, and I think that I hope people still think of us as independent spirited. And we've had owners who have supported that, and it's been good for us, actually. I think there are always new independents coming along, but it's harder to start. In England, actually, publishers start up much more easily than here. I don't know why that is, but we distribute an independent press, Grey Wolf Press, which is very successful and very sort of cutting edge. And they're quite old now. They're like 30 or more years old, but they're really, really good. There are independents. One more question.
Going back to the proposal stage, either for a proposal or a manuscript, are they, at your firm, sent in print or email?
Either one, it doesn't matter, we do everything with email now, it's just the way the world works, it's all, people say, would you rather have a hard copy, and I say, no, don't bother with it, you know, it's too much, it's so much easier for them.
Did I understand you to say that you do accept unsolicited
Oh, yeah,
manuscripts?
we always have.
But you're the only one in the world anymore.
I mean, we have, let's be honest about it, we have something called slush parties on Friday. Assistants read a lot of those, but we do accept.
Can you read everything?
What?
You read, you look at everything that comes in?
Somebody does. Yeah.
Oh, I
We're
think that was
publishers.
wonderful. That's very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare these days. Good for you.
Well, listen, go read a book.